Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where I am working once again on my Gruesome Gulch mini layout. Now, you may remember way back in the first installment of this series, I built this lightweight coffin-shaped framework from 1x2s, and we're going to be building on that today. I want to finish off the benchwork and finish off the roadbed, and maybe, if there's time, lay some track and even get some trains running. But here's the plot twist. I'm not going to put any more wood into this. All of the rest of the construction of the benchwork and the roadbed is going to be done with this stuff. XPF, extruded polystyrene foam, which is extremely strong and extremely lightweight. Now, looking at both the plan and the planning model that I built, I think the first thing that I want to do is cut a piece of that XPF that's the same shape as the layout to act as sort of a basement, a ground floor for the whole thing, for everything that's going to be built on top of that. This is some 1-inch thick XPF. You can get it in 1/2 inch, 2 inch, 1 inch, depending on where you live and what the availability is. My favorite to work with is the 1-inch thick XPF because it's relatively easy to score it and snap it with a utility knife to get straight cuts. One of the first things I want to do is cut this down to the 6-foot length of our project because, quite frankly, I'm running out of room to work in here, and 8 feet by 4 feet takes up a lot of space. Now that I've scored through that, I should be able to snap this section off without too much trouble. There we go. Nice and clean. Perfect. Now this XPF has some pre-scored lines in it, which just happen to line up with the 32-inch width of the framework, but they're not cut very deep. So if you're going to use them, it's a really good idea to go in and cut them a little bit deeper. Okay, I've got the length and the width. Now I just need to trace on the coffin shape. Got this aligned perfectly centered on here. This XPF actually has a grain to it, similar to wood, so it cuts easier in one direction than it does in the other. Coming just a little bit inside of that line that I made, because I know that the line is just outside of the actual frame, so giving it my best eyeball guesstimate. Now I'm using my plan to figure out where the underground river is, kind of measuring. Remember, this plan is drawn at a scale of 1/8 inch equals 1 inch, so it's a very simple matter for me to place the ruler on here, figure out how many 1/8 of an inch, or inches that is, and then translate it onto this surface. So I've drawn a series of dots here at different coordinates that will show me just where the river is supposed to go. I've got a little bit of artistic license I can use, but I want to make sure it doesn't interfere with any track or other components, because I'm going to cut this out with my hot wire cutter so I can have some plexiglass down on the bottom of this for the underground River of Souls effect that I have planned. That'll work. Now I'll use my hot wire cutter, cut this shape out best I can. Now this river is not going to be like other rivers and waterways that I've modeled in the past. This one's going to have animation. It's going to have lighting effects. At least that's the plan. So I want to make the bottom, the water itself, out of some clear plexiglass so I can have lights or projection effects underneath. So I've cut a piece of clear plexi, and I'm going to be cementing that to the underside of this. First, I want to fog it a little bit, right where the water runs. Do it in this area right here. Some 400 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to swirl it around like that and just fog all of that up. I'll use a damp cotton rag to clean that off and see how we did here. Get the dust off. Now I'm going to flip this over. Glue this into place with a little bit of this Loctite Power Grab adhesive. This is the same stuff I used to hold all the layers of foam together. In theory, it should work on this stuff too. I guess we'll find out, right? Oh yeah, that's grabbing right away. That's just fun right there. Now I want to raise this whole thing up about an inch above the framework. I'm going to take this board off for a second. And I've cut a whole bunch of blocks that are all 1 inch thick. And I'm going to use those to elevate the whole thing. Some glue on these blocks. And then I can put that board back into place. And further secure this, I'm going to use some drywall screws, which you can go right through the foam with. These act sort of like pins, except the threads really help to draw the pieces of foam together, eliminate the gaps. Trick is you don't want to over torque them, you just want to get them down in that foam just to hold the pieces together. I do this quite a lot with layered foam, makes it a little bit stronger. Alright, well, moving forward, here's where we are at. I've already started laying out and cutting out the roadbed for the track out of the same 1 inch thick XPF board. Already done the lower level, and now I'm getting ready to do the upper level of track before I do anything else down here. So we'll go ahead and take this off. I've also lifted the entire thing up onto a taller table, which makes it much easier to work on, and it's much closer to what the final height of the layout is going to be once the actual stand is built. So right now I want to grab another piece of the XPF board, and I want to lay out and cut out the upper roadbed for the track that's going to go up here. Now I've found that the most expedient way to do this is basically to create a blank, which is the overall dimensions of the layout, 32 by 72 inches, and then I can just take my Sharpie and trace the outline. And I could just flip this over, cut these parts off to get my coffin shape. Now I'm not worrying about the exactitude of any of this, because after all of the layers of foam are in, I'm going to take a power sander and I'm going to go around the whole outside of this thing and level up, straighten up all the sides. Not too bad. It's seen worse. Not a bad fit. So now I need to recreate my track plan on the XPF, and all I really need to do that is a couple of rulers, a bar compass, and my trusty Sharpie. Now I've set the bar compass for a 10-inch radius, and fortunately this kind of XPF, which is scribed like this, has a center line built right in, so I don't have to measure for that. I know right where that is. 10-inch radius circle over here. And just like when drawing a track plan on paper, I always start with the curves first and then connect everything up. Set back 3 inches. 3 plus 10 is 13. So measure in 13 inches from this end. There's my center. Now this front track just basically follows along the front edge here, set back about 2.5 to 3 inches. And this is right where the depot is going to be. On my plan, the track curves around through the caverns and then comes back, and this is actually a 12-inch radius curve right here. So I need to find the center of that curve. On my plan, let's see, 34 inches. 34 inches from this end. Center, it's right on the center. Oh, look at that. 12 inches. Well, that makes it easy. So there is my center point. Adjust the bar compass to a 12-inch radius. Alright, now I just need to connect up the straights. Now I can use my Sharpie to make that line a little bit more visible for the steps to come. So now I've got my track center line, but that doesn't really tell me exactly where to cut. So the first thing I have to do is figure out where all the bridges and stuff like that are, because that material needs to be cut away because there'll be scenery below the track level. Inch that way, inch that way. The first bridge I'm putting in here, this is the one that's on the above ground side of the layout. There's a road that comes up here that leads into the town of Gruesome Gulch. Once again, I'll also draw those details in with the Sharpie, even label them so I don't forget. And of course, these pieces of the roadbed will eventually be cut out altogether. Now I'll go and mark things like where the tunnel portals are, and then I can start figuring out the parts of this I need to cut away. And the next step is going to be to start building these layers up. So I need to take this off and get my my lower track level and start putting that in. What I'm doing now is putting in the risers basically for the upper deck, and in some cases here I'm actually just cutting pieces of foam and using them like boards, because I need to come up 6 inches from this baseboard, and you know, basically it's sort of be about 4 inches above this lower track. I'll use some longer drywall screws to draw that together. There we go. Now today I'm going to lay some track, but before I do that I actually want to paint the surface, at least where the track's going to go, with some acrylic paint in order to seal the foam. I'm doing things a little bit different on this layout. I'm not putting down any kind of cork road bed. I'm going to lay the track directly on top of the foam. But then when I go to paint it, I usually use a spray enamel. And so I have to protect the foam that's going to be underneath the track so that that spray enamel won't craze and dissolve the polystyrene foam underneath. So with that in mind, I've mixed up sort of an ash gray color, and I'm just going to paint that all over the top of this this center line, and I'll be able to see that Sharpie line coming through. That's one of the reasons I did it in Sharpie, is because I know it'll actually show right through this acrylic paint. Now I'm choosing this color because this underground realm is all going to be very kind of dark and, well, Hades-like, you know, so I want kind of an ash color. Okay, paint is dry. Let's lay some track. Now, another thing I'm doing a little bit differently on this one from earlier projects is I'm using some different track. In the past, on the Thunder Mesa layout, I've used Pico On30 Code 100 rail exclusively. This time out, I'm using some micro engineering Code 83 On30 track. And it has a much more scale appearance than the Pico On30. As far, you know, the ties are much closer to the correct size and dimensions, and the slightly smaller rail profile also helps. But the thing I really like about it is that when you bend a piece of the track, it holds the shape. I bent this to a 10-inch radius 2 days ago, and it has stayed in this shape. It hasn't sprung back. Pico will also hold its shape, but not as well. It will actually slowly kind of creep back, creep back open. So I really like this, especially for a small layout with very tight radius turns like we have here. Now the key I've found to laying track successfully is to be prepared to have everything you need right here in front of you. What I'm doing right now is I'm putting the rail joiners on this piece before I connect it to the board, so that when I come in with the next piece, that'll be ready to go. And you might be wondering, why the heck is he wearing rubber gloves for this? Well, because the stuff I'm going to use to adhere the track to the foam is liquid nails for projects. Not the most friendly thing to your skin. I'm just going to put a bead of this down the track center line for this first piece, And remember, I always like to start on the curves and match things up later on. Now I've got a piece of cardboard. I'm going to take and spread this out. Now, let's see. Start right about here. Follow that center line. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to put some weight on this in the form of my 1, 2, 3 blocks. Let that glue set up for a minute. Trying really hard not to get glue on the top of the rail, because that sucks. Well, now I've got a little situation over here which I am not crazy about. I have to solder these two pieces of track on a curve. This one wasn't long enough to make the entire 12-inch radius. In my experience, your mileage may vary. In my experience, regular, consumer grade soldering irons really don't generate quite enough heat fast enough. What you need is fast, strong heat to be able to solder track. And whoa, and they just don't get fast enough. So I prefer to use a torch for this, but that presents a few problems also. This is a Bernzomatic butane torch, which works great. But the problem is here is I've got foam, which melts. I've got the plastic ties, which also melt. And to top it all off, I'm using a flammable adhesive in the form of the liquid nails. It's not really flammable after it dries, but you get the idea. So care is needed. And the first thing I've done, I've already got the two pieces of track matched up. I've got the rail joiners on there. By the way, I'm using a Xuron flush cutting rail nippers. If you don't have a set of these and you're trying to lay track, I highly recommend getting some. You can get these from Micromark for cutting the rail. So anyway, it's all in the preparation here. You want to have everything where you need it, not a bunch of stuff in your way like that piece of track right there. So I've created, to try and help to keep the foam from melting underneath the rail when I apply heat, created a little heat sink. This is just some aluminum foil wrapped around cardboard with a low enough profile that I can slide it here underneath these rail joints. That'll help a little bit. If there's a little bit of melting, I'm not going to worry about it. It's fine. Call it a culvert, And then I need heat sinks on each side so the ties won't melt. So I'm using my 1, 2, 3 blocks for those. Those make good heat sinks. And then I've got a wet towel right here also. Keep things from catching on fire. So I'm using a 60-40 lead tin, a lead-based solder with rosin core flux, which is the best for electrical work. Gives you a good electrical connection. You shouldn't really usually need to use a flux with it, but yeah, sometimes you do. So the idea here is to get the rails very hot, very fast, and then just hit it with the solder. Got it. It's an advanced technique. Takes some practice and time to get used to not burn the place down. As you can see, I did melt the foam just a little bit right there, but it's no big deal. But that should behave like one piece of track now. As I bend it the rest of the way around, some weight on there. Now in these 4 sections of track, there's 4 separate sections. I actually used only 3 36-inch long pieces of the micro-engineering flextrack. There are only 2 places where they're soldered, here and here. And I'm going to leave these joints free. You always want to leave some of the joints free, preferably not on a curve. And that's to allow for expansion and contraction of the rail as temperatures change throughout the year. Let me get some glue here and there. Okay. We got ourselves a loop, boys and girls. Well, if you're anything like me, first thing you want to do after getting some new track laid is hook up a couple of feeders to it and run a train or a locomotive. Make sure everything works. So I'm boring a couple of holes down through here. I can run feeder wires back up through. I'm going to use yellow and green wire for the DCC hookups on this layout. Mainly because I like to be consistent and use black and red for all of the lighting and effects and stuff like that. There's actually going to be more of that wiring than there is track wiring. So this is some 28 gauge wire, by the way, for those keeping track. The best way I've ever found to do this is you remove a little bit of that insulation at the end, bend that kind of a right angle, and then you loop this back around, and then the spring action of the wire will actually hold that in place up against the rail until you get some solder on it. Perfect. For this, I'm going to use a good old soldering iron rather than the torch. I don't want to set anything on fire. Now, I can't stress enough that the tips of these soldering guns need to be really clean in order for it to generate good heat. And sometimes I'll just take a flat file and get all the old gunk off just like that. Those the rest of the way through. All right, let's clean the track. First thing is I like to go around with a Bright Boy abrasive track cleaner. Get any glue I might have accidentally tracked onto the top of the rails. This is my favorite track cleaning tool. I haven't showed you this before. Just a piece of cork, and then I cut a strip of cloth from an old cotton t-shirt, wrap it around like this, use a couple of push pins, thumbtacks to hold it into place, and then we soak that a little bit of 70% isopropyl alcohol. Just go around the tops of the rails. I'll get into power and control in a later episode, but for now, I'm going to use this. This is a Bachmann Easy Command DCC controller, which I picked up real cheap on eBay. Should work just fine for our purposes right now. So I just finished painting the lower loop of track, like I said I was going to. I used some Rust-Oleum Ultra Flat Black Camo. Great color for track. And now I'm just going to go around with a Bright Boy and clean the paint off the top of the rails. Make sure everything still works the way it should. And then I think we can put the next layer into place. Now I just need to get a bead of glue on all of these mating surfaces. Drop that second layer down on here. Let's see. Get this lined up close as I can. And then I have a minute or two of working time. Get it in just the right. Wow, I did good. Now I'll go around and this comes a little bit. Yeah, a little bit that way. Okay. Drywall screws. Just to snug everything down. Well, it's a brand new day, and my goal is to finish laying all of the track up here on the upper deck, get that wired up and operational, and basically wrap up this phase of the Gruesome Gulch Railroad project. So, let's get to it. Well, look at there. Everything works. Gotta love it. Well, this marks a major milestone for the Gruesome Gulch. The benchwork is done. Track is all in, and everything is running. Everything is operational. So the next step is going to be to build up, I think, more of the scenery with the good old pink foam. Get it up to its final level. Maybe do some work on Skull Butte, which is going to be over here. But all that is going to have to wait for a future episode of this series, because that's all the time we've got for now. I want to thank you all so much for following along with the Gruesome Gulch project and all the projects here at Thunder Mesa Studio. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy seeing this kind of thing. Remember, you can also follow along on Instagram at thunder.mesa or see what's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. And if you really like what we're doing here on the channel and want to show your support, you can do what these nice folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. That's what I'm doing here. Adios for now.